All right, so we should be seeing the opening slide. So thanks for taking time today to listen into this session, whether it's right now or in the future on YouTube. But what are we going to talk about today? So kind of Nick gave that good introduction, but just to outline how this session is going to run, I am going to start with just an overview of Central. So just to orient everyone, make sure we know kind of how Bluehill Central fits into what Instron sells. But then after that introduction, we're going to dive into the meat of the presentation, where we want to go through those 6 benefits of a database versus a traditional file system. And so we're going to go through the data integrity consistency benefits, then security and access control, data accessibility and searchability, compliance and audit trails, the backup and recovery, scale and scalability. So once we go through each of those benefits, we're going to then take a step back, and after kind of you've considered what Central's all about in terms of how you can manage files, if you are wondering how to get Central into your lab, we're just going to go through a couple steps of what that buying process looks like, what that upgrade process looks like, and then talk about maybe different database integration alternatives that Instron offers. And then we will finish with a Q&A. So if you do have questions as I'm talking, feel free to submit those questions and we'll get to them at the end of the session. So let's get started. So Bluehill Central, maybe you're asking yourself, what is Bluehill Central? It is Instron's lab management tool that enables you to manage your Instron data. And so by data, I mean the files, so your test methods, the sample and batch results, your report templates, the users who are using the equipment, interacting with the machine, what they're allowed to do, what their permissions are, and doing all of those things from a centralized location. So you can kind of see this diagram going back and forth, shows the architecture. It is known as a client server architecture. And so you can look at, let's say, these 3 components being the laboratory, the office, and the data center. And so in the lab, you have the machines themselves, you have computers telling those machines what to do and what calculations to run. They're running Bluehill Universal. So that's what, because controlling the equipment, that's a client of this client server architecture. And every time a user goes to interact with the equipment, we're going to access this shared file repository and that server. So if someone logs in, authentication, who they are, what they're allowed to do, if they need to select a particular method to run a test, what are we doing? We're going up to the data center, grabbing that latest version of the method from the server and retrieving that information. You run the test, you produce some data. Where does that data go? It's getting sent back up to the server in a secure manner to be accessible from other clients on the network. And so that's kind of how you can run tests within Bluehill Universal as a client of Bluehill Central. And what's kind of demonstrated in this office view is the second client, which is Bluehill Central. And so Bluehill Central is an application as well that allows you to view all of the files that are being stored from all of the activity on the machines. It allows you to do other things that we can get into. But just to add a little bit more color, if we look at the primary roles of Bluehill Central, starting from the far right, that you have this orange role, settings. No matter how you've purchased Bluehill Central to be integrated into your lab, everyone's going to see settings. And this is where you set up your team and all of the users or members of those teams and what they're allowed to do at the equipment. The green role is called Trend Tracker. Trend Tracker allows you to query all of the test results that are being generated at any of the machines and allows you to track different statistics and trends over time. The blue role is called traceability. So it's our compliance package, and you can do a couple things within traceability. One of them is performing electronic sign-off of changes that need approval. So if you make a change to a test method, or if you run a test and you need to have someone look at those test results and either approve or reject what's been changed, that you do that within this blue traceability role. And then there's also an audit trail that's just in the background, automatically capturing all of the system activity, people logging in and out of the equipment, making changes. All of that is in a chronological audit trail that can be viewed from this blue role. And then the one on the far left is called lab management, which is currently the file repository where all of your methods are going to live. All of your samples could be stored so that whenever anyone on any client, whether you're from sitting in your office or if you're at the machine using Universal, you're always pointed to the same place. And so kind of, if you're ever considering adding Central to your lab and connecting your machines up, then you're going to be making a decision about, what do I care about? Do I want the shared file system? Is that really kind of the primary benefit for me? Or do I need do I need traceability? Do I need trend trackers? So those are things that you can work through with our sales team for what makes sense for you. So hopefully that was a good overview, and we can jump right into the benefits that we're talking about. And these 6 benefits really are going to be honed in and focused on this lab management role, because this is the role where files are stored. So things are going to live here rather than historically where Instron data and files live is on your local Windows file system, or maybe you use network drives, but it's controlled through the Windows environment and File Explorer. So everything that we're going to talk about is kind of the benefits of storing things on a database. So the first thing is superior data integrity and consistency. And the way I want to kind of demonstrate each of these benefits is just showing one versus the other. So on the top, we'll have the database, and on the bottom is the traditional Windows file system. So for data integrity and consistency on a database, that you have a single source of truth. Maybe you've heard that in other aspects of your business before, but it's generally kind of what you're aspirationally trying to get to. And in the Instron context, it means that you can have all users access the same kind of latest version of a file, no questions asked, no kind of 100% confidence in that area by using a database. We also get version control is typically built into databases. So tracking everything that's happening on that file, and kind of more importantly, storing each of those revisions. So not just overwriting things as changes are made. Databases also have advantages for validation rules and kind of relationships between different data types to try to prevent inconsistent or corrupt data from being entered. And so how does this compare to the traditional file system? So file systems can be prone to duplication of data. That another common downside is that this duplication and trying to update things is difficult, and it requires you many times to manually make a change in 1, 2, 3, 10 different locations to copy that update through every local instance. And there's also no inherent mechanism to enforce the data quality or relationship between files. And as I mentioned just a minute ago, that I'd imagine everyone has experienced problems in the past where something's been overwritten, and it's difficult to retrieve the original data that was lost. So that's benefit number one. And as we go through this session, I wanted to just show a quick snapshot from the Bluehill products of kind of how we've implemented some of these features. And so one of the ones that I'm showing right now is revision history. So when you are using Bluehill Central, you can select any file and you can look at its revision history. And so you can very simply see each revision of that file as it's evolved over time. You can expand these individual revisions to see exactly what was changed, who changed it, what it used to be, what it currently is in terms of what parameter was changed. And you can have access to each and every revision because we're storing them on the database. And so if you need to revert back to a particular revision, then it's very simple to do that. Okay, number two, moving on to enhanced security and access control. So on the database side, what do you get kind of related to this topic is that typically databases are going to have integrated role-based access of individual files and folders. So a little bit more granular than what we'll see in a little bit more granular and certainly more integrated than a traditional file system. Also, security is typically managed centrally. So being able to understand who has access to the system, what their permissions are, and doing that in one place in case you need to make a change or if you need to just confirm access in an audit or something, that databases are more centrally managed typically. And from a security standpoint, the encryption of the data at rest and in transit is typically more secure and within your control. So if we look at the file system, alternatively, that the access control to individual folders and files it can be done within Windows, but we find that it's infrequently used. And if it is set up, it's not maintained well over time because typically there are a couple different kind of main pain points with this, with IT potentially being a bottleneck to grant and remove access in certain areas of files and folders where the people who want to make those changes might not have the permission to do that on a given network. And a second kind of downside is that many times the users within Windows are managed separately from your equipment, the users within Bluehill. And so having two different platforms and user authentication types to try to control the files that are being shared between each just adds complexity and it makes things more difficult. Also, just in general file systems, it's going to be harder to track individual activity and changes to files and folders that many times Windows can't see within the file to understand what's changed. And security, kind of similar to the first topic, is that when you have network configurations, that's really the only way you can implement a robust security through a file system is being on a network. And it requires discipline to avoid vulnerabilities and accidental deletions. And so we find that when we visit labs, many people are operating without security, and there's quite a bit of risk associated to losing data because everything is managed through Windows. So in Central, this is a snapshot where if you were to select a folder, and the same view would be if you were to select a file, that you can go into its attributes and you can directly within Bluehill, so people with the correct permissions who are managing the files that are being used can easily control who has read-write access on that team. So whether it's the entire team has access, if nobody can actually read or write particular files, or if just one or a couple of people on the team are allowed to make modifications to a particular test method, or if you don't want people to make changes to a sample after it's been run, you can control that simply through the file system. Okay, benefit number 3 is improved data accessibility and searchability. So on the database side, that they are inherently designed for efficient querying and retrieval of data. That when you need to find something, you can perform complex searches based on the metadata found within the file. So whether you need to search for results specific to an operator that ran the test, or when it was the date that it was run, the material that the test was on, that you should be able to quickly find what you need. And also crucially is that its accessibility from various locations, various applications, all managed under the same set of user authentication and permissions is made much simpler and cleaner. Whereas if we're using the file system, that many times you're storing things in the same similar locations where the rest of your company or organization's files are being stored. And kind of it requires quite a bit of discipline to make sure things are stored in the right location. If you're trying to find something, you really only have the file name, or trying to figure out where it was stored via folder structure. And you only have kind of basic content to be able to search from. And so a lot of times, not only is it harder to find things, but we're trying to query and search for things can take quite a bit more time. And certainly if you're trying to find metadata, if that's what you have, and you're trying to say, okay, where is this test sample that was tested with this material type, and that material type is not in the file name, then it might be difficult to find those related samples. And so many times you would have to be opening up dozens of files just to find the right data that you're looking for. And so I have a couple different screenshots here. The first one is when you're looking at the file system. I kind of blew it up, so hopefully we can see. But it looks like Windows, right? Everything is, instead of being in the Windows environment, is getting stored on the database, but we still have kind of the folder structure tree over here. Everything that you might be searching for is in the middle. We got a preview on the right-hand side, but we have searching mechanisms to search by file names, by dates, by file types, maybe who modified it, to help you find what you need to be able to access a particular file. And the second screenshot is specifically for Trend Tracker. So if you are interested in trying to identify a sample or a particular result using kind of discrete metadata that the operator has entered while they're testing, so like the material code, system ID, product ID, whatever you guys are using to identify the material being tested, that's what's going to be in your Trend Tracker database for you to search and build queries off of, to be able to return all of the results associated to that particular thing you're trying to find. Okay, moving to number 4 is streamlined compliance and audit trails. So on the database side, it's common for databases to have robust audit trails that are automatically tracking activity. So who's doing things, what they did, when they did it, tracking potentially at a place for why they did it with comments. But we know exactly kind of all of the activity of everything that's happening. And so depending on what industry you operate in, this can be kind of just a nice to have, or it could be kind of crucial or a requirement for regulatory compliance. Another thing related to compliance is electronic sign-off. And so many times databases have clean solutions around different approvals. So rather than having to print out a PDF or print out a report and physically signing that and scanning that and adding that into a different business system, that many database solutions offer authentication within the application to avoid that manual process. So that's something we certainly see with databases. On the file system side, that many times audit trails don't exist, or they might not have all the information that you need to be able to reconstruct the events and prove what you need to prove in certain situations for compliance. And when there are databases, many times they are localized. And if it's not a single database that it's, and you're operating with localized audit trails, that accessing that information, protecting it, backing it up is always going to be more difficult. And without that audit trail, I mean, if we go back 20 or 30 years, that for industries that needed to track changes, that was a very manual process, super time consuming to be able to manually track things, and it's very prone to errors and missed activity. So for Bluehill products, that traceability, this is a snapshot if you go into that traceability role. And so I had the audit trail selected where you see a chronological list of activity on any of the connected machines. So you have the timestamps, the user, kind of what was changed, the actual file location and name, maybe a comment. So you have a full log that you don't have to think about, that you can refer to at any point in time. You can search through it, you can filter for things, you can print it out. That's our audit trail. That the other area is if you do require electronic sign off, you would and you log in and you're a user who is permitted to approve or reject things, and you'd see a queue of items that are waiting for you to review. Okay, number 5 is centralized backup and recovery. So pretty straightforward here. Databases are kind of designed to be easily backed up for recovery purposes. If there is a scenario where something is corrupted, that you'll have backups to revert to quite simply, and it's typically one button that will take a snapshot of everything you need, whether it's all of the files you depend on a daily basis, all of your historical data, all of the user information, and kind of all of the system settings can all be recovered in one click. Whereas on the file system, backups are more manually managed, and that you can certainly back up files, but again, it's typically managed outside of an application, and it's more complex, less and more inefficient compared to database recovery. So snapshot within Bluehill Central is that when we have an application called the Bluehill Server Configurator. And so for the person managing the Bluehill database, that this is an application that they would have access to perform some client management activities, to connect it to your SQL database that is being used to actually host and store the files and settings. But within this application, you can also manage recoveries and backups. So you can do it here. You can also configure SQL, Microsoft's product, to do recovery and sorry, that gets backup and recovery on that platform as well, if you're more comfortable doing that on the SQL side. Okay, last but not least, and again, pretty straightforward, is that databases have unparalleled scalability and performance, and that they are designed to handle large volumes of data and maintain that performance as your lab grows. So many times they're easy to kind of retrofit to handle more data. Whereas file systems, as your lab scales and as the number of files and file sizes and number of machines and users accessing it from different points increases, that performance is known to degrade significantly. And so this is, of course, going to depend on if you're storing things locally at the machine or on the network. But in any case, performance will degrade in comparison to having every piece of equipment or any client just communicating to a much more robust, scalable database. And yeah, that was the sixth benefit. No photo or screenshot necessary here. I think that's pretty intuitive. So the last slide I have before we get to questions is, like I said before, just a little bit of a guide, step 1, 2, 3 of what it looks like to implement Central and just some considerations if that's something that you're considering. So first, we always recommend to consult and talk with your IT team. Share this solution with them. That you can even send them the link to this presentation, because those 6 benefits, I would say every IT rep in the world is going to understand and agree with the reasons to move to this type of solution. But you want to make sure that they are aware of it, that they support it, and that they understand the architectural requirements for setting this up. And so there needs to be a dedicated SQL database that they would manage, that the equipment, the machines themselves in your lab would need to have access to a common domain or network. So those are some basic kind of things that need to be confirmed, that IT agrees that this is going to be beneficial for reason XYZ, and that we can make it happen in the lab to network things together. And so if after that conversation internally, then you can certainly reach out to our team, and maybe reach out even before that, because we have some good collateral and things to help you have that conversation with your IT group. But certainly reach out to our sales group to learn more, to see what parts of Central make the most sense for your lab. You can have a kind of a personal demo with one of our team members to really see it in action and to ask questions, and to certainly demos are helpful for these types of things. And then ultimately we'll give you a quote for what makes sense. And so that quote is going to be inclusive of a Bluehill Central license, which is only one for your lab. So you don't have one for each equipment. That if you could have one lab, you could have multiple labs that are talking to that same Bluehill Central server and database. So you just need one of those. And then the equipment in your lab, the Instron machines, their Bluehill Universal licenses will need the latest Bluehill Universal with a plugin to connect to Central. And so those plugins, the options that I talked about at the start of this session, are whether or not you just need the file system, and you'd be getting a plugin for lab management. If you want to do the trend analysis, you'd be getting Trend Tracker. And if you need the audit trail, you'd be getting traceability and lab management, which are bundled together for that offering. And then what does it look like once you purchase the product, that there's, in terms of supporting that installation, we start with remote support. So we want to kind of touch base and make contact with your IT team that will be managing the database over time. And we are going to walk them through and help them set up the back end, essentially. So our technical experts will talk with them over a number of sessions just to get everything installed and set up on the database and server side. And then once that's good to go, our field service engineers will show up on site to upgrade Universal to the latest version, connect those machines to the database that has just been set up, and train anyone that wants to be trained on kind of how to set up your first team, add some files to the database, show, of course, any features that need to be trained. So that's the flow of kind of that you should expect to see. But what I want to finish on is that Central isn't the only database solution. That certainly it is kind of a database solution that controls everything in the Instron world. But one of the things I wanted to quickly talk about is other integrations that we do. And so one fact that I think is pretty jaw-dropping that is helpful to communicate this is this bubble that just popped up, where the average lab technician spends 25 to over 40% of their work week on manual data entry and repetitive administrative tasks with a 4% rate of error. And so if you just let that sink in for a second, that we're talking about hundreds, if not thousands of hours a year that people are manually entering data, and they can't do it at 100% accuracy. And there is a huge opportunity to save time throughout your organization and give that time back to more value add activities. Because many times, more often than not, the data that they're entering into the piece of equipment, so in this case, an Instron machine into Bluehill Universal, when they're creating a sample and entering 5 to 10 things about the sample they're testing, that information lives somewhere else. Someone already entered that in a different business system. And we're just wasting that time by kind of duplicating that data entry. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is because Bluehill Central, again, isn't the solution for everything. That as you learn more about this product, that you'll learn that it's great for having a secure way to store your files, to control users, to track trends if you don't have a good way of doing that currently. But if you think about how your business operates and your lab operates, are there other platforms that you routinely use? A LIMS system, an MES or ERP, QMS systems. There's a lot of acronyms, but they're all different database platforms that store data. And they're used for purposes outside of just Instron, and building an integration for Bluehill to talk to those platforms and automate the flow of data between those platforms to the machine, or to our machine back to those platforms, is something that we routinely do for our customers, and is incredibly beneficial for those labs. And so just wanted to make sure, try to gain some awareness to that offering, where our Bluehill team builds those custom integrations. So anyways, I just wanted to end on that. And I think we can move into a Q&A. So let me see what questions we have. So there were a couple registration questions that came in as people were signing up for the webinar. So I'm going to start with those and then see what else pops up as we're going through them. So one of the questions from registration is, how can I make a custom data folder for easier access? Without Microsoft Word on my computer, is there another way to view data? Okay, so hopefully I understand the question. It looks like a couple different angles to this, but I think that a good way of answering this is that to start with where we store files. So Bluehill, say test methods, that within the test method, you're defining the location where that output data is being stored. So you can have the same location for all methods, or you can kind of cater it for different test types to get stored in different places. But whether you're storing things in Windows or whether you're sending it to Central, that those methods and the output location is going to define where that is going. So you could have a custom folder in that sense. And to be able to view it, if the end goal is you're trying to view the test data on your computer, that it's going to depend on the type of data file that you're trying to view. And so what I mean by that is, if you want to be able to open up the Bluehill sample, look at the test curve, maybe change a calculation, but have the full view as if you were at the machine, that we recommend having Bluehill Universal on your computer. So we sell offline licenses of Universal that are very affordable to allow you to install Universal on any computer so that you can open up your samples to view data. You can create methods from your desk. That is definitely an option. But if you are trying to look at other data types, like say CSV or Excel files, if you do create reports in Word or PDF, that a couple of different things that typically to open it up, you're going to need Microsoft. You're going to need Excel. You're going to need Word to open up that. If you are storing things on Central, then you can find that file. You can get a preview of the file from the database in Central. But if you need to physically open that up, then you're going to need that application. Okay, another question is about automation and AI. And I think that was relevant with just being able to store data on a database unlocks a lot of different technologies. And one of those things is I think related to this question. So specifically the question is how to retroactively tag data using automation or AI. So for instance, this looks like a characterization curve, or this particular sample doesn't match the 10 other previous samples that you have in your database. And so that's the question. It's a good question. And I think it's pointing at where a lot of software is headed, or if not already there. I guess simply put, Universal today doesn't currently have an automated AI tool which knows what a reference curve is or characterization curve to then automatically flag any subsequent curve that says this looks different, you should take a look at it. So it's something that we have actually heard a request for in the past, and is on our backlog to have that in the product in the future, but it's not there today. Really, the closest tool that is pretty similar to what you're getting at that we do have is Trend Tracker. So to be able to flag non-conformances is really what you're getting at. And Trend Tracker does that by looking at the test results and calculations that you care about and using a variety of statistics to flag different deviations or abnormalities in particular batches. So that's kind of one of the core capabilities of Trend Tracker. that is sort of related to that question. It looks like we have a few other questions, so I think I'll get to these 3 that I see, and we'll see where we're at. So the next one is what database types can be used for Bluehill Central. So that's a really simple question that today Microsoft SQL Server, SQL Server, is the database type that we use. And so depending on your installation, your lab, the number of machines that you need to connect it to, that there are a couple options, whether it's a full-blown SQL server, and that license would be managed by your IT team. And that's the most robust recommended solution that allows you to connect any number of machines. You don't have to worry about performance or anything. That's definitely recommended. But if there's smaller network configurations where you just have a machine or 2, that you can use kind of the light version of SQL Server. It's called SQL Server Express. It's a free product, but it's not as scalable as the full version. But that is an option. The next question is Bluehill Central cloud-based? So I'll answer that by saying, so just like Bluehill Universal, it's a desktop application. So the Bluehill Central viewer clients that I was showing kind of some snapshots for, and even the server application that's running on the database, that they are kind of traditional applications that are installed on a computer per se. But the database itself, that if you use, say, AWS, and that server, it lives on the cloud, then there's nothing preventing us from communicating to that database. So I would say databases, a lot of them are still on premise, but cloud-based database is still supported, as long as the equipment and all the clients have access to the same domain that database lives on. So typically it's everything that we're talking about in this case of being a cloud-based database, that it's still very well protected behind kind of a firewall. It's not just like a hosted website, but we do support cloud-based databases in that sense. And then the last question I see here is, can we access SQL? Can we access SQL tables that Central uses to transfer data to our own databases? So I guess I'll add a little bit more color as I answer this, where so we know that Central uses SQL, and so the SQL is typically structured in a table structure for how data is stored. And I think the question is asking that, okay, we have different platforms that our business uses, different types of databases where we want to send things that are sent to Central from the machines, collect it all in Central, and then transfer it to a different source. And so I'd say that the simple answer is today, no, that's not what Central is designed to do. That the files and the results stored on Central are intended to be accessed through Bluehill applications. So the files and the results that are getting stored can't be transferred to external databases. That being said, that's just the standard product and what we recommend. That this question kind of gets into that last topic that I was talking about external database integrations. And if there is a need to send files or results elsewhere, then we are completely open to it and can support it by building any integration that you need. So whether that is using Central and pushing things from Central, or sending things directly as they're kind of changed or generated from Universal, that if they need to go to an existing database, just reach out to our sales team, and we're certainly open and encourage having those conversations of trying to streamline and create a more secure data transfer than what you might currently have. So yeah, I guess that's all the questions. I don't see any more that have popped in. So I think it is time for me to return things over to our great host, Nick Erickson. Are you there, Nick?
I am. Yes. Thank you, Dan. So before I wrap things up, just have a few quick notes, then you can be on your way. So as I mentioned at the top, I'm going to be emailing each of you a copy of today's recording. I'd also encourage you to check out our YouTube channel to find previous webinars and other educational and helpful videos. Dan, in particular, and along with a number of people from our applications team, have done an excellent job over the years of producing explainer videos for various features in Bluehill software that should be of interest if you're looking to improve some of the efficiencies in the lab. And then lastly, a survey should pop up once this webinar ends. We'd really appreciate if you could take a moment, let us know what you thought of today's presentation. So with that said, thank you, Dan, for your presentation today. And thank you for attending. Really appreciate all of you joining us today. Take care, everyone.